some time today to share with you. Again, my name is Rich Hua. I am a global strategist and innovation evangelist for Amazon Web Services. And today I'm going to talk about how Amazon innovates and our unique culture. We certainly started with some humble beginnings as a little online bookstore that had this idea of being able to carry more inventory online than you could ever do in a physical one. And then we basically moved into more categories of e-commerce. Uh-oh, just saw something fall here behind me. And then we went into related segments, such as selling diapers and auto parts and a lot of different other things. And then into new and unrelated ones, such as Amazon Web Services, IT of all things. So we've gotten really good at taking problems and then solving them for the masses. And again, one of the ideas is AWS, where I work under Amazon, where I've taken this data center idea and pushed it to the edges and then turn it into a utility. And so that means it's ubiquitous, it speeds innovation, and it's something that really is quite powerful as a concept. So I'll talk about exactly how we actually do that and the methodology that we have to be able to accomplish that. So I'm just gonna get my screen back up here. Apologize for the little snafu. My office is not cooperating with me this morning. Okay, you should see me. So where does innovation begin for us? We always start with a customer and we work backwards. And our mission, though, is to be the Earth's most customer-centric company, right? It's a really, really broad mission, and it takes many forms and sizes, but we really, really want to be that. We truly want to be as customer-centric as we possibly can. We don't believe we've arrived, and yet that's our mission and the thing that we constantly strive to be. And as I mentioned, the way we do it is we take our customers and we work backwards from them. And that's for us where innovation begins, right? It really begins with understanding our customers and inventing on their behalf. Sometimes it's finding out what they want and need. Other times it's creating things that they don't even realize they need because we are inventing things on behalf of them. And I love this quote from our founder, Jeff Bezos. He says, there are many advantages to a customer-centric approach, but here's the big one. Customers are always beautifully, wonderfully dissatisfied. Even when they report being happy and business is great, even when they don't know it, customers want something better. And your desire to delight customers will drive you to invent on their behalf, right? So one of the most powerful things that we do is we really look at customers and continuously iterate and innovate and invent because we see the pains that they have and the challenges they're facing, and we're trying to solve them. And the big advantage to this idea of being customer-centric is that customers are always dissatisfied. Jeff actually has a phrase that they're divinely dissatisfied. And if you ever either babysat kids or have your own kids or are aunt or uncle to kids, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Give them something on Christmas, and you're very lucky if a month or two later they're totally as happy with it as they were when they got it, right? They're divinely dissatisfied. And the same with customers, right? They always want something better. And so our desire to delight them will constantly drive us to do new things. And, no customer actually ever asks us to create something such as the Prime membership program. But holy cow, it sure turns out that people wanted it, right? And so when we do that, we don't build technology for technology's sake. We don't do it in isolation. We really strive to put the customer at the center. And one of the things is that when you're focused on customers, it's actually good for our business because it continually pushes us to be better. Whereas if you're focused on competition, you don't always have to improve or innovate. Because the fact is, if you're beating the competition and they're not doing anything new, well, guess what? You don't need to either. But when you're focused on customers, you always have to do new and innovative things. And so in that vein, we've done a lot of things over the years, as you see here on the screen. Founded in 1994, Amazon, and then became .com in 95. And then after a few years, we started selling CDs and DVDs as well as books. And then in 2006, AWS came around. And that was really kind of a really unique time because we found that scaling Amazon.com in a global way was a lot of hard work. And we learned a lot of valuable lessons from it. And we thought, there's probably a lot of customers out there who also want to scale, but they're having a hard time and don't necessarily have the expertise to do it. We've actually developed a lot of experience through all the things we've done with Amazon.com. Maybe if we start this service, which eventually became to be called the cloud, that people would actually benefit. So we launched in 2006, and so many customers decided that they wanted to start using it. It grew in incredibly fast at an incredibly fast pace. And what happened is every year the leadership team would get together and think, surely someone else is going to enter this space and have their own cloud services. But something really strange happened, and that is for almost 7 years, no one entered the space. So AWS wound up having this incredibly huge lead because we started first and no one joined in until many years later. And so that's why AWS does have the incredible depth and breadth and scope of services because there's no compression algorithm for experience. There are a lot of things we did right, things we did wrong that we learned from, and so it gives us a vast amount of experience in this sort of cloud world. And so after AWS came many other things that you're probably familiar with, such as Prime and Kindle. And how many of you are Prime customers out there? Okay, most people are, and I want to thank you for your business. I was a Prime customer way before I ever joined Amazon. I love it. It's an amazing thing. And certainly during these COVID-19 times, it's become a lifesaver in so many ways, right? We have really relied on it in so many ways to get the essential items that we've needed in our home. Prime Video came after that, and then groceries, the Echo, and Alexa with the AI capabilities, and then bookstores and Go. Interestingly enough, right, this idea of going into physical bookstores and a physical little shopping area that you can get things really quickly. And so what we decided, we started melding sort of the online with the physical because that's what customers wanted. And then with Go, it was an experiment up in Seattle. Now it's actually a service that can be used by other companies even. And the idea of being able to go in, grab something, and just leave really quickly without ever having to interact with someone. You're on the go, you're in a hurry, you want to be able to get something quickly. I had the benefit of being a beta tester for the very first store in Seattle, and it was like the weirdest experience. You walk in, you grab your things, and you just kind of walk out, and I felt like I was shoplifting or something. But very, very cool. Uses a lot of artificial intelligence, computer vision to make sure people can have an accurate experience as they shop. So all of these businesses are really premised on what you see here, which is the growth flywheel. And this in so many ways is the foundation of how Amazon operates each business, whether it's the entire Amazon.com or even smaller units. And it's based on the idea that customers will always want more value, selection, and convenience. It's not something we'll ever want less of. Right? I mean, how many of us would ever want to pay more for something if it's exactly the same as something else? Right? How many of us would basically want not enough choices rather than a lot of the choices that we want to be able to, select from? And of course, convenience, right? Who's signing up for, oh, I want it in a month rather than a day, right? No one. And so these three premises actually drive this idea of the flywheel, which is when you provide greater selection, they're on the top. Think Amazon.com, right? Lots and lots and lots of books rather than just a few in a bookstore. It provides a better customer experience, which in turn drives more traffic to that platform or website, which in turn attracts more sellers who also want to sell their wares and use that platform, which in turn allows you to have more selection. And that flywheel goes around and around faster and faster and faster. And along with that, because of the economies of scale, as you have more sellers and more variety, you can actually lower the cost structure, which allows you to also lower prices. And so that also is feeding that flywheel. So you have that selection experience flywheel, you have the lower cost structure flywheel, and they're both spinning around faster and faster and faster, allowing you to be able to really have a better and better customer experience. And so every single business that we run in Amazon really is premised on that. There's an interview by someone who was asking Jeff Bezos a little while back. He said, hey, how do you think the industry will change in the next 10 years? And his answer was, I have no idea how the industry is going to change, honestly. 10 years is a long way out. But I will tell you what's not going to change. Customers will want more value, selection, and convenience. That is something that is not going to change. And so we really base our business model on the things we know for sure, and we know that is something that's just a truth. And one thing that in terms of lowering cost structure and lowering prices, when you lower your cost structure, you actually have, I guess, three choices. You could either keep your prices the same and increase your margin. You could actually, lower your prices, or you could actually raise your prices and dramatically increase your margin. And so what we have decided to do, whenever we possibly can, is to lower our prices because we believe that provides a better customer experience. And the fact is at Amazon Web Services, any guesses on how many times we've raised our prices? Well, if you guess zero, you're correct. And yet, how many times we've lowered our prices? Over 80 times. Since 2006, our inception, we've lowered the cost of different services and features within Amazon Web Services over 80 times. It is cheaper now to run things in the cloud than it ever has been before in the history of mankind. And
No
so, anyone
websites,
from a
desde
large
que surgiu, ela já
multinational.
baixou 80 vezes o preço.
I'm sorry, could you please mute your line if uh, to avoid background? So the fact is, when you use AWS now, you could be a huge company, or it could just be really somebody in your garage, but you can avail of the same technology at a really pretty economical price. Certainly more economical than trying to go buy out giant server and install Oracle database or something like that. So really powerful stuff. Now, I love to share the first shareholder letter that Jeff wrote back in 1997. And he talks and he says that the Amazon uses the internet to create real value for its customers, right? It's kind of this really interesting idea back then. And I love that phrase in the first sentence of the second paragraph. It says, "But this is day one for the internet." And that concept of day one is something that we try to live out at Amazon. And essentially what it means is, hey, it's only the beginning. We've only just begun. It's always time to invent and iterate and get better. We're certainly not even close to the finish line. And we always need to think of it as the start of something beautiful, right? And so that sense of always inventing, always creating, always innovating is something that really we strive to live by and pervades our company. So much so that Jeff Bezos and his senior leadership team in Seattle sit in a building called the Day One building to remind them that it's always day one. Right? And somebody asked a little while back, hey, what does day two look like? And Jeff's response was, well, day two is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. And that's why it's always day one. Right? And as you look around, you can certainly see companies that are in the day two phase, right? They're irrelevant or becoming more and more irrelevant. And from then on, just a slow decline and eventually death, right? And the larger the company, the slower it will be, right? Maybe it's going to take them years, perhaps even decades to eventually have a demise, but demise they will face if they're a day two company. That's just the reality. And so we are actually pretty paranoid about becoming day two. And so we really, really strive to continuously be day one company. And you may ask, well, how do you do that? Well, there are actually four things that we do to try to remain a day one company and to really keep that innovative culture. And I say try because, nothing's guaranteed. We've been around 20 some odd years. We're really still pretty young as a company. So we certainly have no delusions that it's just going to automatically keep on going. And so we're striving. Sometimes, we're succeeding. Other times things don't go the way we want. We have to learn from it. But these are some things that have helped us be really innovative so far. So there's culture, there's mechanisms, there's architecture, and there's organization. So let's talk about culture for a second here. And our culture is, I would say, fairly unique, right? It's kind of the way we think, the way we operate, the kind of people that we have. And so what we strive to do is we strive to hire builders and let them build. And the way we define a builder is someone who is always looking for problems and challenges and trying to solve them. And whenever there's a new product or feature or service that is launched, they consider that the starting line, never the finish line, because upon launch, it's just an opportunity to get feedback from customers and continuously make it better and better and better. And we define builders in actually a very specific way with these leadership principles. And there you see it on the screen, 14 principles that we actually really strive to operate by, hire for, and promote by. And we have the double helix of a DNA because it represents really kind of the DNA of Amazon, and it's what keeps us in unison together as a company. Now, I could take all day to talk about this, which I won't, but they were developed over time, and there's a lot of science behind it and what went into it. And you see them there, right? Customer obsession, definitely the top one. Ownership, learn, be curious, bias for action, deliver results. And then you see invent and simplify, are right a lot, hire and develop the best, insist on the highest standards, think big, frugality, earn trust, dive deep, and have backbone, disagree, and commit. And we call them leadership principles because we expect every single person to be a leader, even if they're not necessarily a people manager. Even the individual contributors are meant to lead. We're supposed to lead our customers to solutions. We're supposed to lead each other towards things that will help our customers and help us to grow as a company. And so these are things that we absolutely strive to hire for and also promote by. And so, every company has kind of their mission statement, and here's what we believe, and here's what we're trying to do. I mean, think about it though. How many of you at maybe the company you're working for right now, or at a previous company, if somebody just grabbed you and said, hey, tell me what your mission statement is and the points behind it, could have actually said even half of them, right? The fact is most people can't. They have no idea. It's just something on their corporate website, and maybe the CEO mentions in shareholder meetings, but the truth is no one really knows what they are, and frankly, most people don't care. At Amazon, the peculiar different thing is that we care a lot about our leadership principles. In fact, when we hire people, we check specifically for them. If you were to interview at Amazon, after your phone screen, you would basically go into what we call an interview loop, and 5 to 6 people will interview you, and each person will ask you a specific set of questions to check for 2 leadership principles. So by the time you're done with your interview loop, you will have been asked a whole bunch of questions about at least 10 of the leadership principles, because we want to make sure you truly embody them if we're going to hire you. So do you need experience? Absolutely. Do you need a record of success? Absolutely. But you absolutely also need leadership principles if you want to work at Amazon, because that is actually really important. And this is how we think about builders who are going to actually serve their customers. And that's how it keeps us unified. And also when you have an annual review, it's based on leadership principles. When people get promoted, it's based on leadership principles. So that pervades so much of our vernacular. So if we're meeting in an Amazon office, which we used to pre-COVID times, and hopefully sometime in the future, not too distant, we'll do that as well. I would often say, hey, if you went outside the door and you grabbed a random Amazonian and said, hey, tell me 5 leadership principles, I guarantee you, every single person could tell you at least 5. Most of them could probably tell you 7 to 10. And that's because we try to live them out every day, and it's part of our culture. And so to give you an idea of what they are, they're actually defined. And I'm going to do something that might be a little strange. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to read them. This is something we actually do a lot at Amazon. We just take a few moments and read. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes. Just go ahead and read this. And I'd love to hear any thoughts or questions after you get a chance to do that. Okay, you can keep on reading, but I'd love to hear some comments from the audience. Any of these seem particularly like, wow, that's really good, or that seems a little strange. Oh, okay, somebody asked a question here. Can you explain more about our write a lot? Yeah, that one I get a lot of questions about. The main question being, hey, does that seem kind of maybe arrogant or something? And it's actually the opposite. So a write a lot means you have good instincts and you can make generally good decisions based on limited information, right? A lot of times you have to decide without all the data you need. And so you have to have good gut instincts, a lot of times based on experience and working with customers and kind of having to deal with things. However, one of the most powerful things is that last sentence. They seek diverse perspectives and work to disconfirm their beliefs. So that's actually the opposite of being arrogant. It means you have an idea and you have a thought based on your instincts and gut, but then you make sure that you ask other people their opinion as well, and you seek diverse perspectives. Hey, poke some holes in what I'm thinking here. Tell me why this could be wrong. Give me a different perspective, right? And so to be right a lot means you actually are willing to ask for feedback, and then you adjust your decisions based on that. Jeff Bezos was actually asked a little while back, hey, you're super smart. You must make a lot of good decisions and probably don't change your mind a lot. And he said, people who don't change their minds are stupid. And his point is that as you get more data, you're gonna inevitably wind up changing your mind because new data is going to advise you on it. So being right a lot doesn't mean you think you're right a lot. It means you actually wind up being that because of that process. And of course, it's not right all the time, right? It means that you generally have good instincts, but you're going to be wrong plenty of times, and that's part of what's built in as well. Or write a lot with learn and be curious. Okay, good question. So one of the things that I do want to point out is these are not like commandments. They're not like the 10 commandments from on high. Jeff didn't come down from Mount Sinai with 2 tablets with the leadership principles. They're actually is specifically intentionally made so that they controvert each other and there's tension between some of them. Right? And you pointed one out, right? Or write a lot versus learn and be curious. Which one is it? Or bias for action versus dive deep. Do you act fast or do you try to make sure you get all the data points? Or think big versus frugality, right? How can you do something huge while also, trying to be as economical or with the fewest resources? So they actually purposely have a tension because as you strive to practice them, you have to figure out which principles apply in that particular situation. Sometimes you do need to just go, you know what? We need to have a bias for action. We don't have time to wait. Let's just go for it, even if we don't have all the complete data. Other times you need to go, okay, I'm trying to find some root cause analysis. Let's not jump to conclusions too early. Let's make sure we really, really dive deep so we can give our customer, the best answer possible as to why this problem occurred or, what's really going on. So that's part of the experience. And, as you're at Amazon longer and longer, hopefully the point is that you'll learn how to balance those against each other at different times. And so one thing too is that, they're not immutable. The fact is they've changed over time. We started with 6 of them, customer obsession being the main one. And then innovation or invention, which became invent and simplify, is one of the other main ones. And over time, they've evolved. We went from 6 to now 14. We added a new one a few years ago, Learn and Be Curious. That's actually the newest one. And then we actually took one and we rolled it into a different one. Being vocally self-critical used to be its own LP or leadership principle, and we actually rolled that into Earn Trust. So it's debated every year among the senior leaders. Hey, are they still our principles? Do we need to add any? Do we need to change any? Do they still represent what we aspire to be as a company? So very powerful. And as you see emails and conversations with each other, we use these terms all the time. It's our peculiar thing, right? Hey, great job showing a bias for action. Wow, way to dive deep with that customer. Hey, great job inventing and simplifying when there was a thorny issue that someone else had not solved before. So those are all part of it. And yes, somebody mentioned dare to fail. I'll talk actually a little bit more about that, but bias for action definitely means you're willing to fail. And we actually have a very cool way of helping people fail often, fail early, and be able to experiment a lot. And I'll share about that in just a few minutes. So that's our culture. and that's how we operate. It's peculiar to us, so we don't necessarily recommend people go out and try to have the same culture. But the point is, if you're going to run your own company or be successful as a company, we believe that culture is important, and it's important for people to really know what that culture is and really try to reinforce it. And that's something that's definitely on our mind. We've gone from obviously a few people to now almost a million, and so, keeping that culture is very much on our minds as we continue to grow because it is important to us as a company. So the second thing is mechanisms. Mechanisms. And these are actually really, really important. At Amazon, mechanisms are complete processes that turn inputs into outputs. And they're encoded behaviors that help us to innovate. And so here's kind of a cool picture of a mechanism. You take the inputs and you build a tool for it. You drive adoption, you inspect the results, and you continuously iterate, and it spits out outputs. And the difference between this and, say, a business process is that you're constantly iterating so that the outputs are better and better. A process is more like, hey, A, B, C, D, you did it, okay, you followed the process, the results are whatever the results are. But a mechanism implies that you're constantly inspecting those results so that you tweak the tool, you tweak the adoption, you tweak whatever you need to so that you're constantly creating better things on the other end. And the reason we rely on mechanisms to change things is because when you find a recurring problem, a lot of times leaders will pull their team together, ask them to try harder, do better, essentially ask for good intentions. And you know what we found? Good intentions don't work. Why? Because people already generally have good intentions. If you say, hey, go have good intentions or better intentions, they can't have better intentions. They're already pretty good. So to ask for change, you actually have to create a mechanism that will push people to change that behavior. And so, this actually came about in a variety of different ways when people were trying to figure out how to, make the quality of things on our website better. And they found that there were customer service people who actually could pretty easily identify what products were defective because they would get a lot of calls about them. Oh, wow, this is like the fifth return of this product today. I know it's bad. But there was no way to actually flag that or do anything about it. And so we actually created a mechanism that we took from the Japanese idea of the andon cord. And so any customer service person at Amazon.com can pull the cord and essentially pull something out of our inventory because they find that it's really defective and customer satisfaction is very low. And that goes to our research team who will then go and figure out, hey, is this truly defective? What's the problem? And try to resolve it. So we've actually given a lot of power to the frontline people so that they can actually create the best experience for our customers at Amazon.com. And that's just one example of a mechanism. Now, I'm going to talk about kind of the most famous example and the most sort of powerful one within Amazon that helps innovation. And that's what we call the working backwards. Working backwards is an iterative process that takes time. And this is how we launch any new feature or service or business unit at Amazon. We go and really look at the customer. And then the first thing we do is we write a PR FAQ, which is a press release, frequently asked questions, and then we write a user manual after that. And this is before we've actually done anything, before we've written one line of code, before we've soldered one joint, before we've created a prototype, before anything. And it's basically a mental exercise to think about who is the customer and then what are we really trying to do and how will it provide value for them. And so it's kind of our own sort of funny and peculiar way of doing it because, of course, as you already know, most people write the press release once they've actually released the product. We do it way, way, way at the beginning before anything's been done. And it's truly fictitious, right? We're just trying to have empathy with our customers and think about what would be something that would really make a difference for them. And so when we do this, there are top 5 questions that we need to make sure we answer in that PR FAQ, which is who is the customer? Right? It's the most important question. The context, the segment, empathizing with them. The customer cannot be everybody, right? It's a specific group of people that we're trying to really understand. What is the customer problem or opportunity? Right? Is the most important customer benefit really clear? Right? Does it provide more value, selection, or convenience, or all three? Does it help us create more trust? This question helps us to focus and prioritize. And then there's, how do you know what customers need or want, right? There's both quantitative and qualitative data and research we have to do. And then what does the customer experience look like? It's actually painting a picture of what it will be like to actually interact with this particular product, right? For some products, we've gone as far as to write about how will it feel to unbox it and pull it out and actually set it up, right? Think about maybe a new Echo, right? What kind of packaging will it be in? How easy will it be to take it out? How easy will it be to set up? I mean, we really think that deeply about it in the PR FAQ. I actually bought an Echo Show 5 a little while back, and I was already an Echo owner. I had the first generation. And, it took a little while to figure out how to set that up. I had to download the app and connect to my Wi-Fi, do this, do that. So it took a little bit of time. But when I set up my Echo Show, I plugged it in, and it actually automatically found my other Echo. And I just had to click a couple of buttons, and it connected to the Wi-Fi automatically. And it was so much easier. And I thought, somebody absolutely wrote a PR FAQ line about that, and they wanted to make sure the customer experience was better. I thought, that's exactly that idea of continuously innovating. Even when something's okay, we want to make it better. And so those are 5 fundamental questions. And then when it comes to FAQs, there's so many different things we try to answer. You see several of them there on the screen. But how is this different from something that's already being offered? Can I get a refund if I'm dissatisfied? How much will it cost? How it affects you, whether you're a Prime member or non-Prime member. So all these things are really important to us. And then there's a whole bunch of internal FAQs, right? What feedback have we collected? How will, number 3 is actually a really interesting one. What will customers be most disappointed in? Really try to think about that, right? What other options did we consider and reject, right? So those are all things that we really write. We put those into we call a 6-pager, a 6-page document. And we then take that document, we take it to a meeting, and maybe there's a vice president there, maybe there's a director, maybe it's actually Andy Jassy or Jeff Bezos or Jeff Wilkie, and we take some time, about 20 minutes, and we silently read this document, and everyone has a red pen, and they just start marking it up. And then you start this vivacious discussion. And you probably read somewhere, Jeff hates slides or PowerPoint, things like that, which, is kind of true in the sense of we don't ban all slides. Obviously, I'm using one right now. But when it comes to wanting to launch new features or launch new business units or something of significance, we absolutely insist on writing, because we believe that writing clarifies thinking, focuses the writer on what is really important, and then allows the readers to also understand based on the quality of the content and the idea, rather than maybe some charismatic person waving their arms and showing slides. And so we do something that's pretty peculiar. Like I said, somebody will come in with a stack of these, pass them out to everyone, and they're 6 pages maximum. You can have appendices afterwards, but 6 pages max, so that everyone can basically read it in about 20 to 25 minutes so they can have a good discussion. And as you see right there, somebody's kind of marking it up, and you debate, you discuss. And the idea is that you'll go through iteration after iteration after iteration. You don't just like have a 6-pack of beer, write a 6-pager, then take it to a meeting. You basically, your peer, people who report to you, take it to a meeting where someone, approved. And you will either get a no way, this doesn't work, or yes, absolutely, or maybe come back with a better version. And so you may need to rewrite it multiple times in order to be able to get it approved. So that's basically what happens. And is my voice a little better now? I did see it kind of jostle a little bit here. Does it sound a little more consistent now? Or is it still bad? It's consistent. Okay, great. So, during these COVID-19 times, there have been a lot of PR FAQs being written, as you can imagine, to try to deal with the current situation. And some really cool things have come from it, right? Temperature sensors in our fulfillment centers, right? And I'm sure you've read about all these, right? As you walk in, large numbers of people can basically be sensed so that they can go, hey, is your temperature higher? Let's make sure that, people are as safe as possible. A lot of new procedures that we've done inside or fulfillment centers, make sure people are 6 feet apart from each other. We actually have computer vision technology with cameras in certain places that basically draw a circle around each person. And when those circles touch, it means that they're within 6 feet. And so it'll beep and it'll alert you to go, hey, back up a little bit. So, a lot of different things that we're doing and trying to make sure we keep people safe, right? You probably read in the news also, we just launched community health centers in different parts of the United States as an experiment to see if we can maybe help people in the local community. So there's a lot of things we're trying to do to be able to make a difference. And every one of them required some kind of PR FAQ to launch. And it doesn't mean it'll be a success, right? Just because we launch it, it may be a success, or, it may fail. But we're willing to take those chances and continuously try to make things better. And I'll talk a little more about that in a second. Any questions about this process? The working backwards, PR FAQ, 6-pager, any questions about that? You can, I guess, either put it in the chat, or if you even want to, I don't know what your format has been, if you are mostly using chat or, saying things out loud. But feel free to ask a question at this moment if you have one about any of that. Okay, no questions, so I will move on. The third piece of how we organize for innovation is through architecture. And architecture is essentially the technology that supports rapid growth and change. And I'm going to show a picture. This is, of course, from 2001: A Space Odyssey, the ancient monolith, right? This represents Amazon.com in the 90s and also early 2000s. We basically had one giant monolithic application that ran everything. And it was very difficult to deal with, actually, because every time you wanted to make a change, it took a long time. You had to get 10 levels of approval, and it took 18 hours to basically compile this 1 gigabyte executable file. So very difficult to make any changes, right? And at the beginning, Jeff and his senior team would bring in the IT folks and say, hey, we want to make these changes. We want them done in the next 3 months. Here's some ways we can improve the Amazon.com site. And 3 months later, the IT team would come back and say, hey, good news. We finally got our servers delivered. We finally racked them and stacked them. We've installed our database software, God forbid, is Oracle. And now we're ready to start. And the team would be like, what the heck? We wanted it done in 3 months, not started in 3 months, right? And so we had this problem that every other company was also facing. So we try to solve it the same way others did. We try to hire more developers. Let's just hire more people to be able to, write more code. The problem was that wasn't the bottleneck. The bottleneck was that everything was going through one door, and doesn't matter how many people you hired, only a certain amount could fit through at a time because it was one giant monolithic application. And we were always buying new hardware to start new projects, and that took months to be able to get set up. And so what we did? We basically broke up the application into a whole bunch of little pieces that today are called microservices. Back then we called them primitives, but instead of that giant monolith, it was now all these little pieces, and each independently did one thing that connected through these secure APIs, or application programming interfaces, and basically they're black boxes to each other. If I'm working on microservice A, I really don't care what microservice B is doing internally. It just needs to do exactly what I want it to do when I call it with an API. And so by doing that, and also by reusing our hardware and going into sort of this, private cloud, multi-tenant, whatever you want to call it, kind of architecture, we were able to rapidly increase the scale at which we're able to improve. So we went from one change every maybe a few months to many changes a second. And so this is actually a representation in the early 2000s, around 2006, actually previous, 2002, of what the architecture changed to. So we went from, again, a few changes a year to 194 million changes or deployments in the previous year. So that's because of the architecture. And so if you are a company today, and you want to be innovative, and you want to change things, you want to move fast, and especially during these COVID-19 times, right? There are some companies that were caught totally flat-footed, right? They're like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I'm stuck in some on-prem data center, and they had a scramble to try to figure out what to do. And others were just ready to rock and roll because they were already built on this very cloud-based, innovative, agile type of situation. Think about the delivery companies out there: DoorDash, Postmates. What ones out there that had to do a lot of that, running on Amazon. And so when all the stuff came in that increased the volume, they were able to scale up very quickly. Of course, Amazon.com itself was able to do that. And so the idea was to be able to create these platforms without gatekeepers, meaning that anybody could now access the technology, right? Whether you are a person in your garage or you are part of a multi-billion-dollar multinational company, you can actually access these IT services that are amazing. And this is a bit of an eye chart, but the point is there's almost 200 different services across AWS, everything from just standard compute and storage to advanced databases like Aurora, to AI and machine learning and all these models, and SageMaker that can basically manage your machine learning models for you as you try to work on your algorithms. Really powerful stuff. And what's amazing is this has actually completely changed the startup ecosystem, right? I'm sure a number of you work at startups or with startups. You know how much it used to cost for a startup to spin up their IT back in like the 90s? $1 million, right? The first million that was invested by a venture capital company basically went to buying a whole bunch of hardware and installing software on it. You know how much after the cloud it now costs to be able to have IT? Negative $100,000. And that's because Amazon will give you funding if you're, say part of a tier one incubator or accelerator. Will actually give you different amounts of funding based on the agreements we've made so that you can actually use the cloud for free for the first year. And so, if you're part of something like 500 Startups or, Y Combinator or a variety of other ones around the world, you'll get different amounts of funding through our Activate program. So now instead of $1 million, it's negative, and you can really get things going very quickly. So think of all the startups out there, whether it's Pinterest or Stripe, or as I mentioned, DoorDash, or you name it, right? Airbnb, they all started with just a few folks running in the cloud. And now, obviously the rest is history. So very, very powerful. Now, the final piece I'm going to talk about is organization. And that's small empowered teams that basically create things and then own them. And one of the most famous concepts you've probably heard of is the idea of the two pizza team. Essentially, an ideal team is one that can be fed by two large pizzas, okay? And that's basically 9 or fewer people. And the idea is that they own a particular piece of something, right? They own a piece of code, they own a feature, they own, some thing, right? And if you think of microservices, when you go on the website, right? Maybe the people who bought this bought that. That's a microservice. The payment platform is another microservice. Recommended based on what you've looked at is another microservice, right? Brand new today is another one. So what happens is when you basically go to the website, all these microservices come together and form your version of the Amazon.com website. So every single person has a different website every time they go to Amazon.com because it's assembled for you. And it's actually different when you go later today than if you go right now because of what you looked at, it'll actually change it. So it's actually pretty amazing. That's part of microservices. So a two pizza team will own each of the microservices. And so we found that because they're decentralized, they're very nimble, and hey, if they made it, they need to fix it. And if it broke, then they need to go back and fix that brokenness. It's not like I created it, I throw it over the wall, and some other team has to fix my junk, right? So it makes them take real responsibility for each of those different things. And so not everything is two pizza teams because that's kind of impossible, but we really try to utilize this wherever we possibly can. Because again, we found that once you get 10 or more people, the communication overhead kind of diminishes any advantage hiring more people will have. So that's two pizza team, and it allows us to be able to experiment early and frequently because you have these teams that own things and then they can try things and then kind of fix it if they broke it. But there's a concept that is actually very powerful that helps us to experiment a lot more than most companies. And that is the idea of a one-way and a two-way door. And very simply put, a one-way door means you go through it, it locked behind you, you can't go back. A two-way door means you walk through it, you don't like what you see, just go right back out that door. And so what we found is that most decisions are actually two-way doors. And they can be experiments because they're reversible, right? And so what happens with many companies is that they think of everything as a one-way door, and so they take too much time thinking about it, and they miss out on opportunities. And so by dividing between one-way door decisions and two-way door decisions, it allows us to have high velocity as well as high quality. So if you're going to launch a brand new business unit, you're going to have to hire people, spend millions of dollars. Of course, that's a one-way door, right? You write a PRFAQ, you go through the process, you go through because, hey, once you spend all of that, there's no going back. But hey, if you want to try a new widget, if you want to add a feature, if you want to do this, you want to do that, most things are two-way doors. And we do that all the time. Say on the Amazon.com website, we'll try a little thing here, try a little thing there. A subset of customers will have this little feature. We'll see if it works. Okay, that worked. Okay, that didn't work. So there's all these experiments going on all the time. And it's really powerful because it's not a one-size-fits-all decision-making. And if it's a two-way door decision and it fails, it's not a big deal. It's actually not even a failure. You just tried it. It's an experiment. Just go right back out. At any given moment within Amazon, there are thousands upon thousands of two-way door experiments going on all the time. We have no idea how many there are because people just try it. In fact, we say, if you're like more than 50% sure it's going to work and it's a two-way door, then you've already waited way too long. You ought to just go through that thing. What I'm doing with you right now actually was a two-way door. 3 years ago, the only place you could actually hear about Amazon innovation was flying to Seattle and going to our executive briefing center. But I had a whole lot of friends and colleagues, who were C-level executives who wanted to hear about the innovation talk in San Francisco because that's where they were visiting. They weren't going to go to Seattle. They wanted to Silicon Valley. And so I basically started this program as a two-way door. I would fly people down from Seattle to meet with these, executives. And then they told me, hey, why don't you just do it yourself? And so I started presenting. I built a team of about 10 people to help present to our customers and people who wanted to hear. And now it's become an official program, and we've actually delivered thousands upon thousands of people have attended so far. But it's just an experiment. I thought, if this works out and it grows, great. If it doesn't, no big deal. And so I didn't need any approval. I just needed some support from some people. We started it, and here we are thousands of people later. And so pretty much it's something we do encourage people to try out. And in terms of failure, somebody asked about that earlier. Amazon's a great place to fail. Failure and invention, as you see here highlighted, are inseparable twins. To invent, you have to experiment. And if you know in advance it's going to work, well, that's not an experiment, right? Thomas Edison famously said, after trying 10,000 things before finding tungsten, right, for the light bulb, the carbon filament. Somebody asked, wow, how do you feel about failing so many times? He goes, hey, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I found 10,000 things that don't work. And so that's actually our attitude. And we have definitely had failures, right? Not everything at Amazon has gone great. I mean, auctions and Z-shops were definitely a failure. We tried those as storefronts to sell things. No one used it. It was kind of a bomb. We actually tried auctions because this little company called eBay had sprung up, and we thought, hey, let's compete with them. And so it was poorly implemented, didn't work. But we learned a lot of really great lessons, and we eventually turned it into the marketplace, where now you see obviously all these other sellers selling right alongside Amazon. And you have to understand how incredibly radical that was at the time, right? Because when you go to Amazon.com now, it might be sold by Amazon or it might be sold by any of millions of other sellers on there. And you can't really tell because we don't like prioritize one over the other. You just kind of see it, hey, sold by whatever, but it's just there. And so at the time, it was really radical because they thought, really? Are we going to put our, in a sense, competitive sellers Amazon sales because we're going to make less money from them than from ourselves? But it was the right thing to do for customers. And it definitely has become, really powerful things since then. The other big, gigantic failure was definitely the Fire Phone. There's a $170 million write-down because of unsold inventory. And, at first we're really excited about it, had great hardware, great technology, but one big thing or two things we learned was number one, hardware supply chain for complex technology is very difficult. And the second thing we learned was that, the application platform is even more important than the hardware. Because even though the Fire Phone had actually superior hardware, it had some really, really cool stuff with the camera and, sensing and all that, it was the Fire OS, and no one wanted to develop stuff on it. People were doing stuff on Android, people were doing stuff on iOS, and like Fire OS, I don't think so. And so we got killed because of our software. And so we learned a really, really important lesson from that, which is doesn't matter how good the hardware is, you got to make sure the software is really, really good and in fact the best. And so we were also working on this other thing at about the same time, and we took that lesson and applied it to it. And that, of course, is the Echo. A lot of technology went into the Echo. Far field technology is very, very important. The ability to recognize somebody talking from across the room rather than just right up against it. That took a lot of physics having to be solved. But the even more important thing was that the AI in Alexa had to be the industry leader. It had to be the best. It can't be third place like, on the Fire Phone. And so, as you can probably tell, compared to the other AI assistants out there, in sort of all these independent tests, it really is the best. Alexa is the smartest one out there and the most relevant in terms of giving you responses and things like that. So worked really, really, really hard on that for Alexa. And then as somebody mentioned here, the skills, right? The fact that you can create skills on it. I created one called Dad's Sayings. And I have kind of all these truisms I say to my kids that drive them nuts. And so I actually created one. So I said, hey, Alexa, share a dad saying of the day. And it'll actually say one of the things I say a lot. It just drives them crazy, but it's really fun. I was able to do it in just a few minutes with the console. So these are the four pillars that allow us to organize for innovation: culture, mechanisms, architecture, and organization. And all those are kind of like four pieces of a table that make it stand up so you can basically put something on it, right? And we found that they're all interconnected, right? They work together to make something that is greater than the sum of its parts. If you remove one of these, you won't really get the same results. I mean, you can certainly get value maybe out of using AWS or having small teams, but really you have to reinforce each other so that you have culture with the mechanisms, the encoded behaviors, with the architecture, with the organization, if you truly want to be able to innovate. And I love this quote from Jeff. I'll kind of end with, which is, invention comes in many forms at many scales, and the most radical and transformative of inventions are often those that empower others to unleash their creativity, to pursue their dreams. My favorite story about this is from Airbnb, that of course has changed the way people travel, right? Now things are quite different now, right? Obviously people are able to go travel globally, stay at Airbnbs, have more of a cultural local experience. And then COVID hit and they had to make some changes. And now people are renting in a different way. They're going to different places to maybe work for a week or work for a month or even longer. And they're now renting Airbnbs in a more extended way to be able to kind of just get out of the house because everything's remote now, right? But the bottom line is Airbnb did a survey a little while back. And not only has it changed the way people travel, but it's changed the way that people actually also earn an income, right? They found that 52% of people who rent out their homes are in low to moderate income areas of the world. And they also found that 53% of them actually rely on that income to stay in their home, and the 81% actually live in the home that they're renting out as well. So it's really changed the landscape of how people, use their homes, travel, and all that. So as I end today, I want to thank you for joining me. Delighted if you want to link with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to email me if you have any questions. I can do anything for you. And hopefully this was helpful in some way. These are some concepts that work for us. And if you want to engage with specifically AWS in any particular way, that's of course where I work. Happy to talk with you further about any of that technology. But I'll pass it back to our host. Again, thank you for your time. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much, Rich, for your informative presentation. Did you want to give the participants the chance to ask you some questions?
We're at the end of our time, and I actually have another meeting. So I've been trying to answer them kind of as people have talked in the chat. So unfortunately, I can't take too
No
much
worries.
time.
You have
Um,
still,
but
your
yeah,
LinkedIn.
but if you do have a direct question, yeah, please feel free to ping me on LinkedIn or even send me an email. Happy to reply, and I will provide these slides so you can have them for your reference also.
Thank you so much. Thanks again, participants. If you wanted to connect with Rich or be able to send him your questions if your questions did not get answered, please go ahead and feel free to grab his information here and then send him an email. Thank you so much, Rich. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
You bet. Take care. Bye-bye. It's been a pleasure.